Marc Morris, The Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginnings of England, 400 to 1066. Delve into the captivating history of the Anglo-Saxons and the early beginnings of England. As you explore this summary of Marc Morris's The Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginnings of England, 400 to 1066. Witness the collapse of the Roman Empire, the arrival of Germanic tribes, and the emergence of new settlements in this fascinating account of political and cultural developments throughout early England. Discover the vital role the Anglo-Saxons played in the formation of today's England, as well as the key elements and innovations that helped create its unique identity.
The treasure hoard and the decline of Roman Britain. In November 1992, a farmer in Suffolk found a treasure hoard containing 584 gold coins, 14,000 silver coins, and decorative objects from just before 400 AD. The hoard sheds light on the social unrest in Britain during the collapse of the Roman Empire, which had ruled the country for almost 4 centuries. Life in Roman Britain had been prosperous and peaceful, with a central government, laws, legions, orderly cities, trade, and industry. However, the collapse of the Roman Empire in the wider world led to uncertainty in the protection of assets, including treasure hoards. The hoard in Suffolk shows that the Roman British elites were losing their grip, and the future seemed bleak. Without Roman infrastructure, trade, and governance, life in Britain became more precarious, especially for the lower classes who were vulnerable to enslavement. To understand the decline of Roman Britain, we need to look beyond the island and examine the wider Roman Empire. Collapse of Roman rule in Britain. Roman rule in Britain was established through a contract where the conquered pledged loyalty in exchange for a share of imperial spoils and peace. The army was responsible for defending the coasts and Hadrian's Wall to maintain peace, but by 300, the required force was decentralized, making Britain vulnerable to invasions by Germanic groups and Picts or Scots. The collapse of Roman rule in Britain was not because of the attacks on its coasts but by events in the empire's eastern province where it lost its troops, leading to the Germanic Visigoths' invasion of Italy, leading to the death of 10,000 Roman troops. The lack of Roman soldiers in Britain cut it off from the imperial center, leading to an economic collapse in Britain, and the mutiny of legionaries due to unpaid wages. The breakdown of order led to a popular revolt, and in 410, after 4 centuries, the Roman order in Britain collapsed, leaving Britons to rule and defend themselves. The arrival of Germanic groups in Britain. The sudden and shocking arrival of Germanic groups in Britain is described by Sidonius Apollinaris, a Roman diplomat who labeled them as bloodthirsty pirates who carried out surprise attacks on defenseless communities. They settled on the east coast and established their own settlements. Archaeological evidence supports the claims that they came from 3 powerful tribes, the Saxons, Angles, and Jutes. The reason behind their migration is uncertain, and archaeologists speculate it was due to rising sea levels. However, Ruin of Britain, A History of Christianity in the Anglo-Saxon Age, written by Gildas around 540, narrates how post-Roman Britain was divided into several kingdoms too weak to defend their territories. Their rulers forged an alliance with Germanic groups in exchange for helping them defeat the Picts and Scots, allowing their allies to colonize the east coast. This decision led to Britain's ruin when the Germanic settlers gradually gained the upper hand and turned against their British hosts. Even though Gildas makes mistakes, it's plausible that the British successors resorted to similar tactics to the Romans, employing Germanic mercenaries into Britain. The role of language in historical developments. This book section provides insight into how language can offer a better understanding of the past and the impact of cultural changes. It compares the historical context in which French and English originated, particularly during the period of conquest when Germanic barbarians invaded the Roman provinces in the 5th century. Despite the similarities in origin, French evolved much differently as it borrowed heavily from Roman civilization. On the other hand, the Anglo-Saxons showed little interest in Roman culture, resulting in a significant cultural break from what came before. The author argues that language is an essential tool in understanding this cultural evolution and the impact it had on the development of both societies. The section provides an informative account of how language can help us understand how societies evolve and why some cultures thrive while others do not. Uncovering the Anglo-Saxon worldview. Despite the lack of material evidence, the literature of the Anglo-Saxons sheds light on their values and way of life. The epic poem Beowulf, for example, reveals a culture that prized bravery, reputation, and lavish gift-giving. While the monsters in the story may be mythical, the real-life kings of the time also used violence to extract tribute from their subjects, as evidenced by historical accounts. The wealth and power of East Anglia. In the 7th century, Britain was divided into warring kingdoms, but East Anglia, ruled by the warrior king Raedwald, stood out with its wealth and power. Sutton Hoo, a burial site in Suffolk overlooking the Deben River, contained a treasure-laden longship that likely belonged to Raedwald. The exquisite craftsmanship and provenance of many objects, including swords, clasps, and even household items made of gold and iron, suggest that Raedwald was a noble-born warrior adorned with riches from distant lands like Syria and India. The burial coincides with the legend of Beowulf, reflecting the Anglo-Saxon tradition of sending off important persons with their possessions. Britain's Christianization. Late 6th century Britain was a land of many gods, but with the Pope's declaration of converting England came a successful wave of Christianization. Initially, the introduced creed was not accepted by the baptized kings, but a more successful wave of Christianization in the mid-7th century was instigated by Irish church officials. With the establishment of Lindisfarne, Northumbria missionaries took up the cause of spreading Christianity across Britain and converted the rulers of all kingdoms by around 670. The rise and fall of London's prosperity. London's strategic location, flat and firm banks, and navigable river made it a prosperous ancient Roman city. However, its decline began after being abandoned in 410 AD. Its revival was sparked by an economic boom in the 7th century, with significant trade between Anglo-Saxons and Francia. London became a trading centre called Londonwick, which wasn't as grand as the Roman city but contributed to the possibility of British cities flourishing. Mercia, a kingdom transformed. Mercia was not just a large kingdom but an influential one that extended from London to the Humber and covered everything between the Welsh frontier and Norfolk coast. After the accession of Ethelbald in 716, Mercian rulers referred to themselves as overlords of all the provinces called by the general name Southern English. Ethelbald and his successor, Offa, brought stability, order, and legitimacy through grand public works, standardized laws, and a more centralized government in Britain. Under Mercian influence, a bureaucracy emerged, cities were refortified, and new silver coins bearing Offa's portrait were issued. Through Offa's love of Romanitas, the culture of Rome and its way of doing things, he turned to the past for inspiration. The political order that emerged was both new and distinctly English. Origins of Viking raids. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle reveals that Viking raids began in the late 8th century when traders returned to Scandinavia with tales of the wealth of Britain. Viking attacks on British religious sites were opportunistic and possibly retaliatory for Christian crusading. The Vikings' ambition grew beyond piracy as they expanded their territory. Rise of Wessex. Wessex emerged as the dominant power after the fall of Mercia. Despite facing the threat of Viking invasions and defeats, Ethelred's brother, Alfred the Great, rallied his forces and defeated the Danish Great Army in 878. He secured a peace treaty that divided England into two zones and cemented his place in history. The greatness of Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great revolutionized England's built environment and intellectual realm in response to the Viking invasions. He transformed the once dilapidated Iron Age and Roman defensive structures into new fortresses that became the seeds for English towns and cities. He commissioned a report that calculated how many men were needed to protect the new structures. Alfred also revived the intellectual environment by translating works from Latin into English and making English the language of the state and its institutions. His successors furthered his reforms, leading to the reconquest of territories occupied by Danish forces, the regulation of laws, the establishment of administrative units called shires, and the issuance of a new currency. Alfred's and his successors' work laid the strong foundation for modern England, and his greatness still lives on today. The rise and fall of the Anglo-Saxons. The history of England's rulers began with Athelred, who failed to repel the Viking invasion, leading to paying Danegeld. To collect taxes, he created local bailiffs, which inspired the local sheriffs. His order to massacre Danish civilians provoked an invasion. Northern subjects accepted Danish commander Knut, and Edward never named a successor. William invaded and took the throne, ending the Anglo-Saxon era.
This summary of the Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginnings of England, 400 to 1066, offers a comprehensive understanding of the events, culture, and customs that shaped the Anglo-Saxon era and beyond. From the mutation of Roman Britain and the migration of Germanic tribes, to the establishment of Anglo-Saxon settlements and the rise and fall of various kingdoms, this account delves deep into a world riddled with political intrigue, warfare, and cultural drama. The narrative wraps up with the arrival of the Normans and the end of Anglo-Saxon rule in England, but the legacy and influence of the Anglo-Saxons continue to endure in the English-speaking state of today.